It was a quiet morning in the small town of Dusty Hollow, where the sun rose lazily over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dry plains. The air carried the faint scent of mesquite and leather, as if the very land itself had been tanned under the unrelenting desert sun. In this forgotten corner of the Wild West, life moved at its own pace, dictated by the rhythm of nature and the toil of those who called it home. At the edge of town stood an old ranch, weathered by time and the harsh elements that plagued the region. Its wooden fence creaked in the wind like the groans of a weary traveler, while the barn leaned slightly to one side, held together by a little more than hope and determination. This was the home of Jacob Carter, a man whose days were spent wrestling with the stubborn earth, coaxing crops from the ground, and tending to his modest flock of chickens. But something strange had happened, a mystery that gnawed at Jacob's mind like a prairie dog burrowing into the soil. His chickens, once prolific layers, had stopped producing eggs altogether. Not a single egg could be found beneath their coop, no matter how often he checked or how many prayers he whispered to whatever gods might listen. It wasn't just a matter of losing income. It struck at the heart of his livelihood, threatening to unravel everything he'd worked for. Jacob scratched his stubbled chin, staring down at the empty nesting boxes. "Little did I know," he murmured to himself, "that this would lead me somewhere I never imagined." The problem began innocently enough. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight spilled through cracks in the coop's walls, Jacob discovered that the hens were restless. They clucked nervously, pacing back and forth, refusing to settle even when coaxed with fresh grain. By midday, the unease had grown palpable, spreading like wildfire among the flock. And then came the silence, the deafening absence of eggs. Jacob tried everything. He sprinkled cornmeal around the coop, hoping to distract them. He cleaned out the nesting boxes, scrubbing away any trace of dirt or debris. He inspected the chickens themselves, searching for signs of illness or injury. But nothing seemed amiss. The hens appeared healthy, yet they refused to lay a single egg. Word spread quickly through Dusty Hollow. Neighbors whispered about curses and hexes, their voices tinged with superstition. Some suggested that spirits haunted the coop, angered by some past transgression. Others blamed the recent drought, claiming it had disrupted the natural order of things. But Jacob dismissed these notions outright. He was a practical man, raised on hard truths rather than fanciful tales. There had to be a logical explanation, and he intended to find it. As the days turned into weeks, the situation grew dire. Jacob's stockpile of eggs dwindled, forcing him to ration what little remained. His wife, Mary, fretted endlessly, her hands wringing together as she watched their savings dwindle. Their son, Tommy, barely 8 years old, asked questions Jacob couldn't answer. Why wouldn't the chickens lay eggs? What had gone wrong? "Pa!" Tommy said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars blink to life above the barren landscape. "Do you think we're cursed?" Jacob ruffled the boy's hair, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "No, son, we're not cursed. Sometimes things don't make sense right away, but we'll figure out." That night, as the moon hung low in the sky, bathing the world in silver light, Jacob made a decision. If the surface offered no answers, perhaps the ground below held secrets worth uncovering. Armed with his shovel and lantern, he ventured the coop under cover of darkness, determined to dig beneath the structure until he uncovered the truth. The soil was hard and unforgiving, packed tight by countless hooves and boots. Each swing of the shovel sent vibrations up Jacob's arms, testing his resolve. Sweat trickled down his face, mingling with the dust kicked up by his efforts. Hours passed, and still there was nothing but dirt and roots. Just as doubt began to creep into his mind, his shovel struck something solid, a sound unlike anything he'd heard before. He paused, leaning heavily on the handle of his tool, heart pounding. He cleared away the loose dirt with trembling hands. Beneath the surface lay a wooden box, its edges worn smooth by age. With great care, Jacob pried it open, revealing its contents. Stacks of yellowed papers bound together with twine, and several small objects wrapped in cloth. "What in heaven's name?" he whispered, his voice barely audible against the howl of the wind. Back inside the house, Jacob spread the contents of the box across the kitchen table. Mary entered quietly, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she took in the scene before her. Among the papers were letters written in elegant script, detailing events that predated the founding of Dusty Hollow. Maps sketched in charcoal depicted areas far beyond the known boundaries of town, and nestled within the folds of the cloth were trinkets, jewelry, coins, and fragments of pottery that hinted at a history both rich and tragic. "This belonged to someone else," Jacob said finally, running a finger along the edge of a map. "Someone who lived here long before us." Mary nodded slowly. "Do you think it has anything to do with the chickens?" "I don't know," Jacob admitted, "but I intend to find out." Over the following days, Jacob pored over the documents, piecing together fragments of a story that defied belief. The letters spoke of family who once owned the land where his ranch now stood. They described prosperity followed by ruin, brought about by greed and betrayal. A hidden treasure, buried beneath the coop, had become the source of endless conflict. Little did they know, however, that the true value of the treasure lay not in gold or jewels, but in the knowledge it contained. One letter, penned by a woman named Eleanor, caught Jacob's attention. She wrote of a curse placed upon the land, meant to protect the secret buried beneath the surface. Those who sought to exploit the treasure would suffer misfortune, their lives unraveling thread by thread. Yet, she also mentioned a way to lift the curse, a ritual requiring sacrifice and humility. Jacob shared his findings with Mary, whose initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. Together, they prepared to perform the ritual, gathering herbs and water from a nearby river. As they worked, Tommy watched with wide eyes, absorbing every detail. When the appointed hour arrived, the three of them stood beside the coop, the wind carrying whispers of ancient promises and broken oaths. Jacob recited words he barely understood, his voice steady despite the weight pressing on his chest. Mary lit candles, their flickering flames illuminating the solemn expressions on their faces. Tommy held a basket filled with offerings, grains, fruits, and flowers gathered from the surrounding fields. And then, as the final syllables faded into the night, something extraordinary happened. The chickens, which had remained silent throughout the ordeal, erupted into a cacophony of clucking and squawking. They dashed about the coop, their movements frantic yet purposeful. Jacob rushed forward, peering into the nesting boxes. To his astonishment, they were filled with eggs, more than he'd ever seen in a single day. But then Jacob breathed, shaking his head in disbelief. The real surprise came later, for it wasn't just the eggs that returned. As the days passed, Jacob noticed changes in the land itself. Crops that had struggled to grow suddenly flourished, their stalks reaching toward the heavens. Rain fell in abundance, nourishing the parched earth. Even the townsfolk remarked on the transformation, attributing it to some divine intervention. Yet, deep down, Jacob knew the truth. The treasure beneath the coop hadn't been gold or jewels. It had been knowledge, wisdom passed down through generations. By respecting the past and honoring its lessons, he had unlocked a blessing far greater than anything material. And so, life in Dusty Hollow returned to normal, or as close to normal as it ever got. Jacob continued to tend his ranch, grateful for the second chance he'd been given. Tommy grew older, carrying with him the memory of that fateful night. And the chickens, well, they never stopped laying eggs again. As the days turned into weeks, Jacob found himself reflecting on the strange turn of events that had reshaped his life. The chickens' miraculous return to productivity was only the beginning. The land itself seemed rejuvenated, as though it had been waiting for someone to uncover its secrets and honor its past. Yet, beneath the surface calm, there lingered a question that gnawed at Jacob's mind. Why had the treasure been buried beneath the coop in the first place? The answer, when it came, was both unexpected and unsettling. One evening, as Jacob sifted through the remaining documents in the wooden box, he stumbled upon a journal entry written by Eleanor's husband, Thomas. In painstaking detail, Thomas described how he had chosen the site for the coop, not because it was particularly fertile or convenient, but because it concealed the entrance to an underground cavern. This cavern, according to Thomas, held not only the family's wealth, but also a series of chambers filled with artifacts and writings that predated even their own settlement. Jacob's hands trembled as he read the words. "Little did I know," he muttered under his breath, that my chickens were guarding more than just eggs. Driven by curiosity and perhaps a touch of greed, Jacob resolved to explore the cavern. With Tommy by his side, armed with lanterns and provisions, they ventured beneath the coop, carefully removing the planks that formed its foundation. The air grew cooler as they descended, carried with a faint scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic like iron or blood. The tunnel leading into the cavern was narrow and treacherous, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Dust clung to their skin, and the sound of their breathing echoed off the walls. At last, they emerged into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Stalactites hung like jagged teeth, and the ground beneath their feet was littered with shards of pottery and bones, both animal and human. In the center of the chamber stood an altar, carved from black stone and etched with symbols that neither Jacob nor Tommy could decipher. Around it lay piles of gold coins, jewels glittering like stars, and tools that spoke of a civilization long forgotten. But it wasn't the treasure that caught Jacob's eye. It was an inscription carved into the wall above the altar. Asterisk, to take is to curse, to give is to heal. Asterisk. For a moment, Jacob froze, the weight of the words settling heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at Tommy, who stared wide-eyed at the spectacle before them. "Pa!" The boy whispered. "What does it mean?" "I don't know," Jacob replied honestly, "but I think we'd better be careful." They spent hours exploring the cavern, documenting what they could with sketches and notes. Jacob resisted the temptation to take any of the treasures, remembering Eleanor's warnings and the curse that had plagued her family. Instead, he focused on understanding the purpose of the cavern and its contents. Somewhere deep within, he felt a connection to the people who had come before him, a shared responsibility to protect the knowledge they had left behind. But as they prepared to leave, Jacob noticed something peculiar. Among the artifacts scattered across the chamber floor was a small wooden figurine, no larger than his hand. It depicted a chicken, its wings spread wide as though in flight. Carved into its base was a single word, hope. Jacob picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. "This must be important," he said softly. "It feels right." Reluctantly, he placed the figurine in his pocket, feeling a pang of guilt for taking even this small piece of the cavern's legacy. As they climbed back toward the surface, the weight of the day's discoveries pressed heavily on his heart. He knew that returning the figurine would be the honorable choice, but for now, he decided to keep it close, to remind himself of the lessons learned and the promises made. Back above ground, the world seemed brighter, the sky clearer. The chickens clucked contentedly in their coop, oblivious to the secrets hidden beneath their feet. Jacob watched them for a long while, his thoughts drifting between gratitude and unease. Had he done enough to lift the curse, or had he merely postponed its consequences? That night, as he lay in bed beside Mary, Jacob recounted the day's events. She listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "You took something from down there," she said finally. "Are you sure that was wise?" "I'm not sure of anything anymore," Jacob admitted. "But I believe we've been given a chance to learn, to grow, to do better. And maybe that's enough." Days turned into months, and the ranch continued to thrive. The chickens laid eggs in abundance. The crops flourished, and the townsfolk marveled at Jacob's good fortune. Yet, every so often, Jacob would pull the wooden figurine from his pocket, running his fingers over its smooth surface. Each time, he felt a sense of peace, as though the little carving carried with it a fragment of the hope it represented. And then, one morning, everything changed again. Tommy burst into the house, his face pale and his voice trembling. "Pa, you need to see this." Without another word, Jacob followed his son to the edge of the property, where a group of strangers had gathered. They wore dark clothes and carried rifles slung over their shoulders, their faces hard and unyielding. Leading them was a man with sharp eyes and a scar running down his cheek. He stepped forward, his boots kicking up clouds of dust. "Mr. Carter," the man said, tipping his hat slightly, "we've heard about your luck. Seems you got something we're interested in." Jacob's stomach tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," the man replied, his smile cold and calculating. "There's a story going around about a treasure buried beneath your land. Some say it's cursed, others say it's blessed. Either way, we're here to claim it. Jacob's mind raced. He thought of the cavern, the artifacts, the promise he had made protect them. You won't find anything here, he said firmly. This is my home, and I won't let you tear it apart. The man's grin widened. We'll see about that. What followed was a battle unlike any Jacob had faced before, not with guns or fists, but with wits and resolve. He rallied the townsfolk, explaining the importance of the cavern and the danger of disturbing its contents. Together, they worked tirelessly to conceal the entrance, filling it with debris and planting crops over the area. When the strangers returned, they found nothing but solid ground and the determined faces of those who would defend it. In the end, the intruders left empty-handed, their threats fading into the wind. Jacob watched them go, his chest tight with relief and exhaustion. He turned to Tommy, who stood beside him, his eyes bright with pride. "You did good, Pa," the boy said simply. Jacob nodded, his throat thick with emotion. "We all did." That night, as the stars twinkled above the quiet ranch, Jacob returned to the coop. He knelt beside the chickens, listening to their soft clucking, feeling the warmth of their presence. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the wooden figurine and placed it gently on the ground. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "for everything." And as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Jacob Carter knew that his journey was far from over. For in the Wild West, where mysteries lurked in every shadow and answers hid in plain sight, the line between curse and blessing was never truly clear. The days that followed were a blur of activity and anxiety. Jacob's heart remained heavy with the knowledge that the treasure beneath his land could still attract unwanted attention. Though the strangers had left, their parting glares lingered in his mind like storm clouds threatening rain. The townsfolk rallied around him, their support accompanying balm. But Jacob knew better than to let his guard down. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, that something greater was yet to come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jacob sat on the porch with Mary. They watched Tommy play near the well, his laughter ringing out across the quiet expanse of the ranch. It was moments like these that reminded Jacob why he fought so hard to protect the life they'd built together, no matter how fragile it sometimes felt. "Jacob," Mary said suddenly, her voice soft but steady, "do you think we did the right thing? Keeping the figurine, I mean." Jacob glanced at her, surprised by the question. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it feels important, like it's meant to stay with us." Mary nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the coop. "Maybe it's not just about protecting the treasure. Maybe it's about remembering what it represents." Jacob considered her words, finding wisdom in them. "You're probably right," he said finally. "It's more than gold or jewels. It's history, knowledge, hope." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hooves pounding against the dry earth. Both Jacob and Mary tensed, their eyes darting toward the road leading to the ranch. A lone rider approached, silhouetted against the fading light. As the figure drew closer, Jacob recognized him. A man named Silas Grayson, a traveling scholar who had passed through Dusty Hollow several months earlier. Silas dismounted gracefully, tipping his hat as he approached. "Evening, Mr. Carter. Mind if I impose on your hospitality for a spell?" Jacob stood, extending a hand. "Of course, Silas. What brings you out here?" "I heard whispers of something extraordinary happening in these parts," Silas replied, his sharp eyes gleaming with curiosity. "A discovery of great significance. If the rumors are true." Jacob exchanged a glance with Mary before inviting Silas inside. Over a meal of cornbread and stew, Jacob recounted the events surrounding the chickens, the buried treasure, and the cavern. Silas listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound journal. "This is remarkable," Silas said when Jacob finished. "The artifacts you described, they sound like remnants of an ancient civilization known as the Skywalkers. They believed the Earth held secrets that could only be unlocked through respect and understanding." "The Skywalkers?" Jacob repeated, intrigued despite himself. "A people who lived in harmony with nature," Silas explained. "They revered the land and its creatures, seeing them as guardians of hidden truths. Your chickens may have been more than mere livestock. They might have been protectors of the cavern's entrance. Jacob absorbed this information, his mind racing. So, the curse wasn't really about greed or betrayal. It was about failing to honor the land. Precisely, Silas said. By performing the ritual and respecting the past, you broke the cycle of misfortune. But there's more to it, I suspect. The figurine you mentioned, it's likely a key piece of the puzzle. After dinner, Jacob retrieved the wooden chicken from its hiding place and handed it to Silas. The scholar examined it carefully, tracing the carvings with reverent fingers. "This is incredible," he murmured. "It's older than I expected. The inscription, *Hope*, suggests it was created during a time of great turmoil, perhaps as a symbol of resilience. What do you think it means?" Jacob asked. Silas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I believe it serves as both a reminder and a warning. The Skywalkers understood that progress comes at a cost. By taking too much without giving back, one risks disrupting the balance. The figurine represents the choice between destruction and renewal." Jacob mulled over Silas's words long after the scholar had retired for the night. Outside, the wind whispered to the trees, carrying secrets untold. Inside, Jacob felt a growing sense of purpose. He realized that his role went beyond simply guarding the treasure. It was about preserving the lessons embedded within it. Over the following weeks, Jacob worked tirelessly to document everything he knew about the cavern and its contents. With Silas's help, he created detailed sketches of the artifacts and translated as many of the inscriptions as possible. Together, they pieced together fragments of the Skywalker story, uncovering insights into their culture, beliefs, and eventual decline. As news of their findings spread, other scholars and historians began to take notice. Some viewed Jacob's discoveries with skepticism, while others saw them as a priceless opportunity to learn from the past. Jacob welcomed visitors cautiously, ensuring they respected the sanctity of the site and its history. Slowly but surely, the ranch became a hub of knowledge, attracting those eager to understand the mysteries of the Wild West. Yet, even as the world outside changed, Jacob remained steadfast in his commitment to his family and his land. He taught Tommy about the Skywalkers, instilling in him a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things. And though the chickens continued to lay eggs in abundance, Jacob never forgot the lesson they had taught him, that sometimes the most valuable treasures are invisible to the naked eye. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight bathed the ranch in golden light, Jacob stood beside the coop, gazing at the horizon. Behind him, Tommy played with the chickens, laughing as one of them pecked at his boot. Mary emerged from the house, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. She smiled up at Jacob, her expression serene. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Jacob nodded, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "We sure have, and we've got a lot further to go." As the day unfolded, Jacob reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the mysterious disappearance of eggs to the revelation of an ancient civilization, each step had been fraught with challenges and surprises. But through it all, he had learned the importance of humility, respect, and perseverance. And so, as the winds of the Wild West swept across the plains, carrying tales of bravery and wonder, Jacob Carter stood firm, a guardian of secrets both old and new. For in the vast expanse of the frontier, where the line between mystery and reality blurred, he had discovered that the greatest treasures often lie not in gold or jewels, but in the stories we choose to tell, and the lessons we choose to remember. The days stretched into months, and the ranch flourished under Jacob's care. The chickens continued their steady production of eggs, the crops grew stronger with each passing season, and the townsfolk began to see Dusty Hollow not just as a place to live, but as a hub of knowledge and wonder. Word spread far and wide about the discoveries beneath Jacob's land, drawing scholars, adventurers, and dreamers alike to the small town nestled at the edge of the desert. But peace, as it often does in the Wild West, was fleeting. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dry plains, Jacob awoke to an unfamiliar sound, a low rumble that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth itself. At first, he thought it might be thunder, though the sky was clear and cloudless. Then came the tremors, subtle but undeniable, shaking the very foundation of the ranch. Jacob sprang from his bed, heart pounding like a drumbeat. He rushed outside, where Mary stood clutching Tommy close, her face pale with fear. The chickens were in an uproar, clucking wildly and scattering in every direction. Even the horses in the stable whinnied nervously, sensing something amiss. "What is this?" Mary whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jacob replied, his eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of explanation. "But it feels familiar. Familiar, because the last time the ground had shifted beneath their feet, it had led into an uncovered cavern, and the secrets buried within. But this time, the vibrations felt different, deeper, more insistent, as though the earth itself was restless. "Pa!" Tommy said, tugging on his sleeve. "Is it the treasure again?" Jacob crouched down, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I don't think so, son. This feels bigger. We need to find out what's happening." With lanterns in hand, Jacob and Silas Grayson ventured beneath the coop once more. The scholar, who had remained in Dusty Hollow to further study the Skywalker artifacts, agreed to accompany Jacob, his sharp mind eager to unravel whatever mystery lay ahead. Together, they descended into the tunnel leading to the cavern, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. The air grew colder as they progressed, carrying with it a faint metallic scent that made Jacob's stomach churn. When they reached the main chamber, they found it altered in ways neither man could have anticipated. The stalactites above dripped water, forming puddles on the floor below. The altar, once pristine, was now cracked and tilted slightly to one side. And scattered across the chamber were strange markings, symbols carved into the walls that neither Jacob nor Silas recognized. "These weren't here before," Silas murmured, running his fingers along the grooves. "They're fresh, almost as if someone or something has been down here recently," Jacob finished grimly. Their investigation was interrupted by another tremor, stronger than the first. Dust rained down from the ceiling, forcing them to cover their mouths and noses. As the shaking subsided, a distant sound reached their ears, a low, mournful wail that seemed to echo through the cavern itself. "What was that?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Silas shook his head, his expression troubled. "I've heard stories of places like this, ancient sites that serve as conduits between worlds. Sometimes when the balance is disturbed, things slip through." "Things," Jacob echoed, unease coiling in his gut. "What kind of things?" Before Silas could answer, the wailing grew louder, accompanied by a rush of cold air that extinguished their lanterns. Darkness enveloped the chamber, broken only by the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi growing on the walls. Shadows moved in the periphery of their vision, too quick to discern clearly. Jacob drew his revolver instinctively, though he doubted bullets would do much good against whatever lurked in the darkness. "Stay calm," Silas urged, his voice steady despite the situation. "We need to figure out what's causing this disturbance." Working by memory and touch, they retraced their steps toward the entrance. The journey back was fraught with peril. The ground beneath their feet seemed unstable, shifting unpredictably. At one point, Jacob nearly fell into a crevice that hadn't been there during their descent. Silas helped him regain his footing, muttering curses under his breath. Finally, they emerged into the light of day, gasping for fresh air. Above them, the sky was overcast, an unusual occurrence in the usually clear skies of Dusty Hollow. A group of townsfolk had gathered near the coop, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Mary, her face etched with worry. "Are you all right?" she asked, rushing forward to embrace Jacob. "We're fine," Jacob assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. "But there's something down there, something we didn't expect." As he recounted their experience in the cavern, the crowd grew increasingly uneasy. Some suggested sealing off the entrance entirely, burying the secrets beneath the land forever. Others argued that doing so might only exacerbate the problem. "You can't ignore this," Silas interjected, addressing the group. "Whatever's happening down there, it's connected to the balance of the land. If we don't address it, it could grow worse, maybe even spread beyond the ranch." Jacob nodded, his mind racing. "He's right. We need to understand what's causing this disruption, and fast." Over the next few days, Jacob, Silas, and a handful of trusted townsfolk worked tirelessly to decipher the new symbols carved into the cavern walls. With Silas's expertise and Jacob's intuition, they pieced together fragments of an ancient prophecy. When the guardians falter, the veil weakens. To restore harmony, the lost must be found. The lost, Jacob repeated, frowning. What could that mean? Silas adjusted his spectacles, his brow furrowed in thought. Perhaps it refers to something or someone that belongs in the cavern but has gone missing. Without it, the balance is disrupted, allowing otherworldly forces to seep through. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. You mean, like whatever we heard down there? It's possible, Silas admitted, but finding the lost element won't be easy. It could be anywhere. Determined to solve the puzzle, Jacob delved deeper into the Skywalker's history, poring over the documents and artifacts he had collected. One evening, as he examined the wooden chicken figurine, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a tiny groove etched into its base, almost imperceptible. Running his finger along it, he felt a click, and the figurine split apart, revealing a hollow interior containing a rolled-up piece of parchment. Unrolling the parchment carefully, Jacob discovered a map marked with symbols identical to those in the cavern. His heart raced as he realized its significance. It was a guide to locating the missing piece needed to restore the balance. With Silas's help, Jacob deciphered the map, which led them to a hidden chamber deep within the cavern system. Armed with lanterns and tools, they ventured farther than ever before, navigating treacherous passages and narrow tunnels. Along the way, they encountered remnants of Skywalker civilization, statues, carvings, and relics that spoke of a people deeply connected to the land. At last, they reached the chamber indicated on the map. Inside, they found a pedestal bearing a crystal-like object, glowing softly with ethereal light. Surrounding it were more symbols, including the word hope carved prominently into the stone. This must be it, Jacob said, his voice filled with awe. The lost element. Carefully, he removed the crystal and carried it back to the main chamber, where the disturbances had begun. Placing it atop the cracked altar, Jacob watched as the structure repaired itself, the cracks knitting together as though mended by magic. The wailing ceased, replaced by a gentle hum that resonated through the cavern. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive weight lifted, and the air grew warmer, carrying with it the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating the chamber in a golden glow. It worked, Silas breathed, his eyes shining with wonder. The balance has been restored. Jacob nodded, relief washing over him. But little did we know, this wasn't just about fixing a problem. It was about understanding the connection between the past and the present, the importance of respecting the land and its mysteries. As they climbed back toward the surface, Jacob reflected on everything that had transpired, from the chickens stopping their egg-laying to the discovery of the cavern, to the final restoration of balance. Each event had taught him valuable lessons about responsibility, humility, and perseverance. Back above ground, the townsfolk celebrated the resolution, lighting fires and sharing stories late into the night. Jacob stood beside Mary and Tommy, watching the flames dance against the darkening sky. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly at peace. And though the Wild West remained unpredictable, full of challenges and surprises, Jacob knew one thing for certain. No matter what lay ahead, he would face it with courage, wisdom, and the unwavering belief that even in the harshest landscapes, hope could always be found, if one looked hard enough.